over 60 years ago, on a dark and stormy night, a mad scientist locked himself in his laboratory at MIT with his 800-pound computer. He wanted to be the first scientist to be able to predict future weather patterns. And in order to do this, he used math and data. And to make his life easier, he decided to shave off the smallest percentage from the number he was working with. So he shaved off 0.000127 from his number. He set his computer up. He stepped outside of his laboratory to grab a cup of coffee. He comes back. He looks at his computer. He drops his coffee all over his laboratory floor because he's so shocked by what he sees. Because in that moment, he realizes that by making the tiniest change to that number, he altered the entire trajectory of his experiment. And that day, Professor Edward Lorenz discovered something called the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is the idea that tiny changes over time can have drastic impacts later on. And the world fell in love with this idea, with over 61 films being made with the title, The Butterfly Effect. Eventually, this idea was disproved in modern science because we know that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, it's not going to cause a tornado here in Nashville. But the butterfly effect is alive and well in life in general. And I know this because the butterfly effect happened to me. Because over 20 years ago, I fell in love with a television show called Sex and the City, like so many others, and I was an unhappy high school student with an active imagination. I liked this show so much that as soon as I could, I moved to New York City in 2005, and I pursued the same job as the main character of the show, Carrie Bradshaw. I had an internship at a fashion magazine. But the print industry was dying, and there was no job for me out of this internship. So I got recruited to work at a conference production company in 2006 that was launching a new portfolio of events and online content on something we called customer management. And a few years later, I attended a conference on customer management. I sat in my seat, I turned around, and in Georgia, in the middle of nowhere, at this conference, I made eye contact with my future husband. And I liked him so much that I moved to San Francisco from New York to be with him. And I had a series of dead-end jobs after that. Eventually, I landed a job at a B2B Fortune 100 technology company. And I loved my job as a customer service executive. My boss was incredible, and she even sent me out in Europe to speak on behalf of this company. And one day I was boarding an airplane, and I got a phone call from her. And she said, "Blake, I am so sad to tell you this, but we're going through hard times at the company, and I'm being demoted." The gentleman who would be taking over her role as the head of the customer service team had a reputation as being a little robotic. He and I did not have a great relationship. 6 months later, I was working in my office at home, and I got a phone call from him. He lived in another state, and he said, "Blake, I have some bad news. You're being laid off." I looked at my husband, who worked in the office with me, hung up the phone, and burst into tears. The next day, I was asked to drive to the office in Silicon Valley to turn in my badge and my laptop. And on the drive, I started thinking about all of the feedback I could give them that would help them to improve the employee experience for other people. I went into the lobby of this enormous building, but my boss wasn't there to do my exit interview. Instead, he sent another manager to do it. And she was actually wearing a headset, and she had a laptop. And very soon I realized she was actually running another meeting while having me sign my exit interview paperwork and hand over my equipment. I felt so disrespected in that moment. I decided I never wanted to have a boss like that ever again. And I just started focusing on this topic of customer experience that I loved and believed in so much. Eventually, during this time, I had a daughter, and then during COVID, I had a son. We have any parents in the room? We've been through a lot the last few years. And COVID was so stressful that my family decided to move to be near grandparents. So we moved to LA, which is where I flew from to be here with you today. So if I had not seen the silly television show created by Darren Star so long ago, I would never have moved to New York. I would never have gotten a job at a conference company studying customer management when no one was caring about this topic at the time. I would never have had a podcast. I would never have met my husband, and so on and so forth. Everyone in this room has a story like mine. 20 years ago, you were having certain thoughts. You were making decisions that led you to be in this room, sitting in this seat in Nashville here with me right now. So just take a moment to think about what happened 20 years ago, your own butterfly effect that led you to be here today.